Hey everyone, it's Sabrina, and today I'm going to present on the Museo Galileo, otherwise known as the Galileo Museum. The Galileo Museum is located in Florence, Italy, with only a short walk from the Uffizi Gallery in Palazzo Vecchio. The museum was formerly known as the Institute and Museum of History of Science and is dedicated to the infamous astronomer Galileo Galilei. It houses one of the world's largest collections of scientific materials and instruments in the world, and for the most part features the Medici family collection and the Lorraine family collection. The point of this museum is mainly for the preservation and to show the preservation and evolution of science. It shows the evolution of science throughout the Renaissance and into the Enlightenment period, and so forth. It also features and shows collections, as we've learned much about, of the Medici and Lorraine family and how they impacted science at the time. A little bit about Galileo Galilei, who this museum is dedicated to. He was a natural philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician who lived between 1564 and 1652. He helped change modern science and astronomy in many ways. For example, he made the revolutionary telescopic discovery of the 4 largest moons of Jupiter, as well as supported the notion that the Earth was not the center of the universe, which was highly controversial at the time. The museum features a bust of Galileo that's at the center of this room, very large. It was actually commissioned by Cosimo III de' Medici, who we learned a bit about. He commissioned Carlo Marcellini in 1674 for this massive marble statue of Galileo. Now, a little bit about the structure of the museum. The museum is located and has 2 floors to it. The first floor features mainly the Medici collection, while the second floor features predominantly the Lorraine collection. And it's quite interesting since the Medici family came before the Lorraine family. It's almost as if you start on the first floor earlier in time and go up to the second floor and see the evolution of science throughout that, which in my opinion is very intentional. Here are some of the rooms featured in the museum. And this document I actually found on the Museo Galileo's website, which is very informational. And if you're interested in this museum, I would definitely go ahead and check it out, and you can explore each of these rooms on the website. Unfortunately, we don't have time to do each of them, but now a little bit about the Medici collection. So as we know, the Medicis were a very powerful family around the time of the 16th, 17th century, around the Renaissance, and they were very interested in collecting, as we know. The scientific collecting predominantly had a meaning. We know that collections had meanings at the time, and the meaning of collecting scientific instruments for the Medici in part was to show knowledge and show knowledge of power. The Medicis had a big influence in the evolution of science, and this floor really displays that. Now on the second floor, we see the evolution into the Lorraine collection, and since we haven't learned much about the Lorraine family, thought I'd give you a little rundown. The Lorraine family comes from France, from the Lorraine region in northeast France. It started predominantly in Tuscany when Ferdinando I de' Medici married Catherine of Lorraine. And it was kind of the beginning of a long-lasting bond between Tuscany and this important Lorraine family, and why it's featured in an Italian museum. And in 1737, the House of Lorraine took power with Francis Stephen, and when the last descendant of the Medici family died. So as we can see, the Lorraine collection features instruments from a bit after the Medici collection, and you can see here the evolution into the interest in chemistry, electricity, and magnetism on this floor, which is quite fascinating and a bit different from the Medici floor. Now, here's some objects in the Galileo Museum. The Galileo Museum features over 1,000 objects, including geometric and military compasses, telescopes, maps, microscopes, watches, globes, bell jars, thermometers, quadrants, lenses, plain astroblades, sundials, and much more. I wanted to highlight here just the interest on time in this museum. There's a whole room about time. As I was virtually touring it, I found it quite fascinating how time had such an influence in science and an interest, and created lots of interest from scientists and nobles at the time. There are many different times, ways to keep the time, such as this hourglass. There's many sundials featured in the museum. We see very intricate, detailed wall clocks. And one thing to note about a lot of these objects is they're quite beautiful. They almost serve as a type of art as well as a way to keep time or keep scientific evidence. So they serve almost a multi-purpose, and would be great to have a collection, display, and show off. So now I just want to talk a little bit about some notable objects. So there's a lot of telescopes as well, as I mentioned. Here, with these white backgrounds, we can see two of Galileo's telescopes. This one on the right is really notable because it was the telescope with which Galileo discovered the 4 largest moons of Jupiter, which is very, very big for astronomy at the time. And it's very, very interesting to see how, this might not be the type of telescope we would think someone would see the 4 largest moons of Jupiter with, but it's very simple and, very advanced for his time. If you think about, that's almost 5 centuries ago in which he built this himself. Now, if you look up the Museo Galileo, this might be the first image that pops up. This is, on the left here, this is an armillary sphere built by Antonio Santucci, a 16th century astronomer. Now, an armillary sphere is a model of the celestial globe constructed from rings and hoops representing the equator, tropics, and other celestial circles. And it's also able to revolve about its axis. Now, this is a gorgeous piece of art as well as a scientific instrument, and it was commissioned by Ferdinand I de' Medici. This piece of object almost represents the universal machine of the world, and it kind of notes the Medici's desire for the power of knowledge in a sense, because of how gorgeous and how massive this structure is. And it's also notable to notice the cross on top, the importance of religion with science at the time. Something you definitely would not see today. Now, I saved the best for last, of course, but this is a picture of Galileo's middle finger, believe it or not, and this is actually Galileo's middle finger, which is preserved at the Galileo Museum. Now, there's an interesting story behind this. So about 95 years after he died, Anton Francesco Gori, a little fan member of Galileo, decided he needed to preserve a couple of his fingers, so he cut off his index, thumb, and middle finger. And we talked a little bit about this, but at the time, religious body parts were often conserved as a way of conserving holy people, and this was thought of as a holy object. But it's interesting to note that Galileo feuded with the church. He was not liked by the church at all, because he was often seen as a threat to the church, most notably because of his paper and his argument for the fact that the earth was not the center of the universe. Now, some people think this finger is pointed up in a positive way at the heavens, and that's why it's displayed this way, up at the heavens, up at science, mathematics. But a lot of people like the idea that this middle finger is displayed because it is a middle finger towards the church, and Galileo's middle finger towards the church, which I think is very funny and interesting to see. And a lot of people come to the Museo Galileo just to see his middle finger, which I also think is quite interesting. But the Galileo Museum in all displays the evolution of science and the preservation of science through collections, and it brought together dispersed collections in a way to show how science has changed, especially from the Renaissance to the present day. Thanks for listening.